سبحان الذي أسرى بعبده ليلا من المسجد الحرام إلى المسجد الأقصى الذي باركنا حوله لنريه من آياتنا إنه هو السميع البصير.
I've read the history of the region, I've read the history of the importance of Al-Aqsa. But one thing, brothers and sisters, remember when the Prophet ﷺ was at his lowest point, meaning that there was such a conflict between Quraysh and between the Prophet ﷺ and the Muslims. It was the dawah of Islam was going nowhere. And the Quraysh did not want to accept Islam. Sahaba, the Muslims are pushing, and it was almost nowhere to go. They had no idea where do we go from here, because that's how the situation in Mecca had become. So in order to give hope to the Prophet ﷺ, Rasulullah ﷺ was sent. Allah Azza wa Jal gave him that whole opportunity to go from Masjid al-Haram to Masjid al-Aqsa. Alladhi barakna hawla. Then we know the whole Isra and Miraj. So one thing that we learn from this is a place of hope for the Muslims. When you think that you are at your lowest, when you think that there is no support coming, when there is no help coming, Islam is being, is constantly in the hands, and the kuffar are playing all kinds of games. We don't know what direction to go to. And alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, you find that Allah Azza wa Jal gives clear direction to the Prophet ﷺ that look, what you are thinking, the world is much bigger than that. To show the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to give the Prophet ﷺ hope. And at the same time, this area became a testing ground for even the Sahaba. You remember when the Prophet ﷺ returned, when he came back, and Abu Jahl was running around, the Quraysh running around Mecca, saying to the kuffar that look, Muhammad ﷺ was saying this and this, and now he's saying that he went to Masjid al-Aqsa, he went to Jerusalem, it takes us 3 months to go there and come back, and he's saying he went and came back in over a month, and overnight he did all of this and he's back. And some of the kuffar in Quraysh, they had hated this. They said, wow, this is what we were needed, and here we go, now we're going to attack Muhammad ﷺ even more. But he was testing. But that testing gave the name to Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu as-Siddiq. Because you remember when Abu Jahl went, and the person he finds is Siddiq, Abu Bakr at the time. His name was not Siddiq. Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu, he finds him and he says, do you know what your companion now, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is saying? So he asked him, what is he saying? And he's saying, look, he went to Jerusalem and came back overnight and this and that. Do you believe in this? Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu, first of all, we know that you have to think twice before you accept news from the kuffar. We told him, if Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying this, I believe more than this. I believe that he is receiving the wahi from Jibreel every day. What is this so hard to believe? And when he heard that, Abu Jahl lost his mind. He said, there is no way. We can't, this is it. The belief that the Muslims have in Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it is unbreakable. But there were some of those who did break. Some of them did break. Some of them were questioning, what are we supposed to say to the kuffar now? And imagine, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put the ayat in the Quran so that the Muslims must say that till today, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam from Masjid al-Haram to Masjid al-Aqsa. And this is part of our aqidah. If somebody does not believe, there is a kafir. Because the ayah says, Subhan alladhi asra bi'abdihi laylan min al-Masjid al-Haram ila al-Masjid al-Aqsa alladhi barakna. He made it part of the aqidah of the Muslims that you must believe Rasulullah was taken from here and he was taken there. And we know the rest of the hadith regarding it and all of that. So this this region has been tested to distinguish between the people of Haqq and people of Batil. Ahl-Haqq wal Ahl-Batil. This is the region, has always been the region that has tested the people in their belief to see how much do you believe. So, now, of course, Rasulullah in his lifetime tried very hard in many different battles. As you know, the Prophet planned many battles towards Sham, to take Sham. But Rasulullah passed away. He tried in Yarmouk and other battles, but he couldn't take Sham. But then he had before he passed away, he had the army of Zayd, Usama bin Zayd ready, and he sends the army of Usama bin Zayd, and the Prophet ﷺ passes away, and then some Sahaba were questioning, should we allow the army of Zayd to continue because the Prophet ﷺ has just passed away? Should we wait? Hold on. Abu Bakr Siddiq makes another decisive, historical decision. It's a decision that became historic. He did not want anyone in the region to think that the Muslims are weak in any way, shape, or form. And right away, and when he sent the army, Abu Bakr Siddiq wanted to make sure, he said, the army, that even though people were questioning, hold on, stop the army of Zayd, it's too long, the Prophet had just passed away, wait. Rasulullah, Abu Bakr Siddiq said no. He said no. I am not going to stop the army that was prepared and sent by Rasulullah. I'm not going to stop the army. So Rasulullah, now Abu Bakr Siddiq, he prepares the ground. As you know, there was a lot of battles happening in his time, the wars of Ridda. There were many who became Murtadeen and things like this. But he put together and he unites all of Arabia, again, to make sure that Arabia is in the hands of the Muslims. Then comes Umar ibn Khattab. Umar ibn Khattab, under his Khilafah, the Muslims gained Masjid al-Aqsā. As you know, the famous treaty that was signed with the Christians in the area called the Umari Treaty. This is what makes Masjid al-Aqsā Muslims, in the hands of the Muslims. What gives it in the hands of the Muslims, the Umari Treaty. It's very important that you understand what that treaty is, because that is what gave, and because the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, dear brothers and my sisters, that the hadith that says that once a land, a region, an inch that was once under the control of the Muslims, meaning it was ruled under the Sharia, if the Muslims lose that land, meaning there is an occupation on that land, colonialism, whatever you might call it, if it happens, you will get that inch in Jahannam. Can you imagine that? The hadith, this is Hasan Sahih hadith. If the Muslims lose a land that was once under the Muslim Sharia, ruled by the Muslims, and they lose it even an inch, they will get that inch in Jahannam. And think about all of Masjid al-Aqsa and Spain and all of these lands that are once Muslim lands and we were under Muslim lands that we have lost, and the responsibility of the Muslim Ummah towards these lands. Are we anywhere close? But this is good. I'm not going with many slides. Inshallah, I'll get to it. The goal is, inshallah, by the time they get to it, I'm going to get to 1917, because that's a lot of very important things that are happening now matter. So now, Umar ibn Khattab takes Masjid al-Aqsa al-Mubarak. That's when it came under their hands. Then, of course, the Muslims ruled this area in general for about 1,200 years, almost 1,200 years. Now, in the middle, there were some ups and downs, which we know what happened during the Crusades. Although in this section, I don't have a lot discussing the Crusades, and I really want you guys, some of the books that I'm going to tell you, please write them down and really read them. Study books, brothers and sisters. It's very important that you understand your history, because the people who don't understand history are doomed to repeat it again and again. You need to understand your history. Like there's a book called Al-Aqsā. It's now in English. Please read it. It's about this thick. It's very nicely done, very nicely written. Read it. It's called Futuhat al-Sham. What is it called in English? The Victories of Sham, I think, something like this. It's there. You can read it. What is it called? Somebody? Huh? Okay. If you know, it's just you'll see it. It's very nice. What's his name? Waqidi. Yeah, Sheikh Waqidi is the one who wrote it. The Conquest of Sham. Conquest of Sham by Imam al-Waqidi. Read it. It's in English. Please read it. You will be amazed how the Muslims took Sham. All of it. Then there's another book called Palestine Documents. A very good book. It was originally written in Arabic, and then it was translated by a Pakistani journalist named, I think, Muhammad Zafarullah, something like this. It's a very good book called Palestine Documents. Read. Please get your hands on it. Right? So those are two books. And of course, the Sirah of the Prophet ﷺ, and of course, read the Quran, because it will give you the foundation that you need to understand what is the Sharia of Allah. Now, two things. As you know, brothers and sisters, when the Crusades came, the situation of the Muslims was exactly, almost if not worse, than you see today of the Muslims in that same time when the Crusades came to the land of Sham in general. And as you know, when we say Sham, what are the areas of Sham? right? So you have those 4 or 5 countries in the region. That's what Sham means, or Bilad Sham or Sham, right? This area that you're seeing today, divided between Lebanon and Jordan and Palestine and what else? Syria and Jordan. This was never the case. And in order to understand when this actually happened and why this happened, we have to start, inshallah, at 1917, exactly what takes place in 1917. Now, so first of all, understand what Sham means. Sham, when you're talking about Sham, you're talking about all of this region. One region, it was never divided as you see, and divided today. And of course, it was divided not this way, but it was divided during the Crusades in, principalities and, things like this. At that time, when the Crusades wanted to get inside, the Seljuks, there's an area, I'm going very fast, but I'm giving you books so that you can read, inshallah, those books. The Muslims put together an amazing resistance. They did. But it was not a united resistance. Even against the Crusades. Like Al-Aqsā. Anyone know Al-Aqsā? Yeah. Right? Good. You need to know Al-Aqsā. This was the one of the Seljuks who put together amazing resistance against the original, when the Crusades wanted to enter. The Turkic, the brothers, they've always done an amazing job protecting the Muslim lands. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless them. Right? And they've always, the Uthmani Khilafah, and of course, they did an amazing job. So Al-Aqsā, he fights back, he uses many different military techniques that were not used before by the Arabs, and then he fights back. But even his resistance at the time was not enough. Why? Because Muslims were not united. And you will see this throughout this narrative that I'm giving you, that anytime the Muslims were not united, the kuffar have always taken that. They made sure that they use that, the differences among the Muslims in order to do what they have done, that they are doing till today. Now, remember when the Crusades entered, in the past, when the Crusades entered this area of Sham, they entered through an area called Antakya, which is still today, right? Antakya, I'm sure you've seen Turkey, been in the news a lot since the Syrian situation, the revolution, right? So they tried to enter from that land, from that area, and this is one of the areas that kept on resisting for 3, 4, 5 months. And they were telling the Muslims surrounding areas that, look, we are only a certain amount of people. We cannot continue this resistance without the help of the surrounding Muslims. You must help. We can continue for 3, maybe 4 months. If you don't help us, we will be finished. We won't be able to continue. The letters are being sent to the hukam of the time. The people, khatibs, and they are going and giving khutbah, and they're allowing them to give khutbah. No problem, give the khutbah, this, that, and the other. But no one is coming for help. No one is coming to help. Everybody is giving lip service, but no one is coming to help. Now, I'm going to repeat something here, brothers. Keep something in mind. When there is an occupation, occupations are not removed by bandages. Occupations are not removed by humanitarian work. Occupation means a foreign army, a foreign entity has entered your land and has occupied it, which means it needs to be removed. And the way the removal happens is the way it has been occupied by an army. Okay? Occupations don't leave just because you like to give, you can talk about it and talk about it and talk about it. No, it takes an army to remove an army. And this is the job of the Muslim armies today that are watching this. Although there's a lot of good news too that you're not hearing, believe me. There's a lot of good news. Ask me that and I'll say what is that good news. Now, instead of sending help, at that time, the hukam, when the ulama went and they're talking to them saying, send us help, please look at what's happening, you need to help. If not, they will be able to walk right through Sham and get to Masjid Al-Aqsa or get to Al-Quds. You need to help and you need to help now. So they were thinking, okay, fine, the help is coming, and help never comes. What comes is some requests that came from the kings at the time, or some rulers at the time, saying that we heard that there's so-and-so beautiful lady in this land, give it to us. There's someone that does a very good job of drawing things, give it to us. Imagine as if you are sitting in today's situation where the Masjid Al-Aqsa is under threat, the whole of Palestine is under threat, A whole area of the Muslims could be lost, and you are sitting there and you are asking for good-looking ladies, and you are asking for some drawing that somebody is good at. Send us them, and we will go back to Egypt. Can you imagine? That was the response at that time. So you can imagine the decline that took place, and you can match that decline to today's Muslim rulers. That the kind of responses that we are getting is not new, but things did change. Things did change. So it's not all bad. Things changed, but that took work in order to change that situation. How long was Masjid al-Aqsa under the Crusaders? Anyone know? 88, 90 years, right? Almost 80 years, mashallah. This is some, mashallah. Yeah. 88, 90 years under the Crusaders. But alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen, no matter what happened, because the ayah, وَلَنْ يَجْعَلْ اللَّهُ الْكَافِرِينَ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ سَبِيلًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says we are not allowed to give the upper hand to the kuffar over the mu'mineen. It's not allowed for the Muslims to do that. Now some people might say, you see the situation of the Ummah today, they have the upper hand. But the ayah, it means that this allowing will not be permanent. It's not permanent that they will always have the hand over your heads. No, they will be, inshallah, they will lose that grip.
Inshallah. But
it will take work. So it takes work, to come up with somebody like Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi. But Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi does come. But it takes work with ulama who understood what is needed. You had Muhammad al-Ghazali, you had Tartushi, you had Abu Khalid Jilani, you had Al-Fudail, Qazi Fudail, who was the scholar that was with Salah ad-Din. It took work to put together a network, put together an education system, put together work in Mosul, where Nuruddin Zanki comes around, and then comes Imad Zanki and all of that, and finally, subhanallah, Salah ad-Din does come, and Salah ad-Din comes, and he first goes after Aleppo, which is known as Halab, then he takes Egypt and unites these two areas, and then he goes after the Crusaders. Once he knows that he has two strongholds of the Muslim lands in his hand. Okay, now this is how I did a huge summary of the whole situation until the Muslims took back Palestine again from the hands of the Crusaders at that time. Now, I'm going to take you from 1917 to 1948. Again, I'm trying to summarize because sometimes history becomes very complicated. It's good, but you need to make sure that you go and you read, okay? Now, how many of you know the British general named Allenby? Anyone know? If you don't know, you need to know. You have to know your enemies, brothers and sisters. You can't be like just living to live. You gotta know who your enemies are, who's planning against you, who's plotting against you. You gotta know these names. I mean, we are an ummah, right? We have to be. I know we forgot all of this. We're just kind of living to live. But this is a ummah with a purpose. So, Allenby, 1917, he walks after World War I. He walks into Jerusalem, the city of Jerusalem, also known as Al-Quds. Right? Al-Quds, we know Al-Quds. When he walked in, he did a very historical thing. He got off of his animal that he had. He almost acted like he's trying to be, one of the Khattab. And one of the reasons they say historically, they say he did that because, and here's the sad part. Majority of the army that was with him, that helped him take Jerusalem, was Muslims. Can you imagine? And the joke was that the largest Muslim army fought the largest Muslim army to give Masjid al-Aqsa to the British. This is the saddest part of the history of Muslims, and it's amazing, but it happened. And many of those people who were in the army of the British were from India. The Gorkhas, the Punjabis, they used them as a martial race. They gave them all these names in order to use them in the armies. And I'm sure you know that. Actually, it will make more sense when I get close to a so-called Balfour Declaration. So this is what happens. Now he's walking in this area. On the other hand, somebody is also walking into Damascus. This was the French general who walks into the Dimashq. He goes directly to the grave of Salah ad-Din Ayyubi, and he kicks the grave of Salah ad-Din Ayyubi, and he says, "Oh Salah ad-Din, wake up, the Crusaders are back." Now, this is, you're talking 1917, which means they were very clear to what they wanted to achieve. They knew exactly what they are talking about as far as the Crusaders being back in the Muslim lands. Literally, imagine the man kicks the grave of Salah ad-Din Ayyubi. And one of the things you might have seen in the conflict in Syria, in the revolution in Syria, one of the things that they did was they bombed the grave of Salah ad-Din Ayyubi. You remember this? Do you remember? You don't remember. Maybe you don't remember. They actually bombed, the Russians, they actually bombed the grave of where Salah ad-Din Ayyubi is buried. I don't know, I'm sorry, not Salah ad-Din Ayyubi, Khalid ibn Walid in Hama and the Homs area. Literally his grave was bombed. And at that time, the Muslims in the region were saying, SubhanAllah, look at our Sahaba, even while they're in their graves, they're a threat to the Kuffar. Because these were the Sahaba. These were Sahaba who made sure the world, and they were not people that you could play with. So, 1917. Now, here's the thing. British has won the World War, First World War. Now, they are planning to literally design the region according to their whims and their desires. The way they want to now design is every single superpower that came into existence, they design the world according to their worldview, right? Their ideological worldview.
Their interest.
Huh?
Their interest.
Right? To ensure their interest. Of course, when the Muslims came, the Muslims united the Muslim lands. They were about uniting the lands. They were about sharing the resources. They were about education. They were about ruling with mercy. Right? And here, the British come along. The British came with an idea which they used amazingly against the Muslims. What do you think that is? Divide and rule, also known as nationalism, also known as nation state theory. The nation state theory that you hear now, a lot of Muslims, unfortunately, even the intellectuals today amongst the Muslims are big about this whole, we have to follow this modern nation state theory and this and that and the other. A lot of people say, well, after World War II, what happened to the Jews, with what happened with, and of course, what Hitler, what he did, killing 6 million and this and that. We accept that, we understand. And they usually use that as an excuse against the Muslims to say that, look, the Jews, they deserve a state. But the question to ask is, well, if that was the case, the coming of Israeli state was beginning in 1917. 1948 is somewhere else, 1917 is somewhere else. 1839 is somewhere else, 1879. This is not like you were starting, we're going to accept that, if you were coming in 1950 and saying, look man, these people are being destroyed in Europe, and so they deserve something, their land, let's remove all the Muslims and put them there. But that's not the case. The case was that the British were always planning this in order to destroy the Muslim lands, or in order to and design the Muslim lands in the way that would fit their interest. Keep this in mind. So now here, of course, the birth of Zionism, the Jewish intellectual influence by nationalistic nationalism for a Jewish state, and the other idea that that this is promised by God. As you know, brothers and sisters, most of the Zionists are atheists. They have no connection to God. They don't believe in God. It's nothing more than an excuse. It's nothing more than a strategy to do what they're trying to do in this area. Okay, but I'll come back to this slide, because there are certain things that are very important more than these. Here. So now, the great game. Remember what I was saying. Now, the British needed a plan. How do we make sure that this area works accordingly, the way we want it? The world powers, brothers and sisters, have always created institutions. Institutions that would work for them. In the case, in 1917, what they did is they created something called League of Nations. Do you remember? You know League of Nations, right? Okay, now you know United Nations. So before United Nations was? League of Nations. Before League of Nations was?
Christian
League of United Christian Nations. That's what it was called. And it developed as it went forward. Okay? So now, at this point yet, there is no League of Nations. So now, the British create an institution called League of Nations. Now, These states, who do they consist of? They consist of the states that they made themselves, they created themselves. They create something called Saudi Arabia. Now look, brothers and sisters, I know a lot of people, every time I talk about these things, people come and they talk about brothers, they talk about this issue, that issue. History doesn't lie. History doesn't lie. History is the way it is. You don't want to accept it, that's a problem, but history, it is the way it is. So you have to understand the role of Al-Saud and the role of so-called Saudi Arabia, and then the role of so-called Jordan, right? These states were created even before so-called Israel was created. And you ask the question, why is that? How come these little states that didn't exist before in 1917 all of a sudden come into existence? Why do you want them in existence? Well, because there is a plan. And the plan is to again design the Muslim region according to their will. Now, certain people, right, certain tribes are given precedence, they're given money, they're given power, like you have Sharif of Makkah, as you know, right? Later on, he became, basically now what you see, Abdullah of Jordan, his great-grandfather is Sharif of Makkah, the biggest traitor the Muslim Ummah has ever seen. And brothers and sisters, this is, even when Al-Aqsā, one of the reasons why in certain areas that he lost, there's a very famous name known as Feroz. Yeah, this guy was one of the very famous traders that had opened up one of the gates of the castles that allowed one of the castles in the time of Crusaders to be taken, which helped the Crusaders continue on their march towards Al-Aqsā. So there have always been traders. You have Mir, Jafar, in Tipu Sultan time, right? There were always these people who played the game in order to do what they did to the Muslims. But the Muslims always came around. That's the amazing thing about the Sunnah. It never stays, in one place. So, this idea of nation-state theory, which was used to its best of its ability in order to create states around this region, in order to fulfill the interest. Now, 1922, Saudi Arabia comes around. Then you have, 1938, these different areas where Iraq is cut in pieces. What you see as Iraq today is not what Iraq. Iraq was something else. It was named Iraq, but the region, the way it's carved, was not the way it was carved. Jordan was just Transjordan. There was no such thing as Jordan the way you see it today, right? Palestine the way you see it today. The Palestine was never a nation state. It was always part of the Muslim Ummah. Neither was Syria. It was all Sham. So, while this is happening, the British made something called League of Nations, asked them to give the mandate, the so-called British mandate, right, given to them by League of Nations, in order to now partition Palestine. They use the states that they created themselves. They use the institution that they created themselves. And then they use it to partition Palestine. They're the ones who did it. The first time it ever happened was this time, where they actually partitioned. Now, the Muslims put up resistance. Don't think that the Muslims were not resisting at the time. They were also resisting. There's a lot going on. The youth are being brought in from Russia, from Germany, from this place and that place. And this is known as now the Balfour Declaration also. Remember, at the time there's also something known as the Balfour Declaration, which you should know. Which is a declaration, basically took the land, the British took the land that didn't belong to them, and they gave it to someone that it didn't belong to. That's literally what the Balfour Declaration is. It didn't belong to you. But this was a promise they gave. Took money and all this kind of stuff to do what they needed to do, Balfour Declaration. Now, the Muslims are resisting. Muslims are fighting back. From 1933 to 1939, there is amazing resistance to the Yahud and to the British, actually. More than Yahud, because Yahud was not the problem. It's always been the British. And today, it's not the Israelis, it's the Americans. Let's be honest. Israel wouldn't exist without the United States. We will invent it if you have to, remember?
I've often said, Mr. President, if there were not an Israel, we'd have to invent one.
It is the best $3 billion investment we make. Were there not an Israel, the United States of America would have to invent an Israel to protect her interest in the region.
So anyway, League of Nations comes, partitions this thing, resistance begins. 1933 begins, you have somebody named al-Aqsā, very famous name today, right? He's one of the scholars. He starts one of the first jihad against the British. Very all-out war against the British. He says we cannot accept this. The Muslims are not, this is by the way the version of the declaration here, British mandate, we talked about this is resistance to occupation, this is a Al-Aqsā, and he's shaheed. Martyred along with Mujahideen after a 6-hour standoff with the British occupation forces. 1933, now 1935, over 4,500 Palestinians or Muslims in the area are killed. Now, again, the betrayal. What was the betrayal? 1938, between 1938 and 39, the resistance, British don't know what to do. They don't know what to do because they're stuck now. The resistance doesn't want to stop. They need to figure out a way to stop this. What do? While all of this is happening, the invented states that they had, namely in this case Al-Saud, they literally bring him, and they bring the so-called Ghazi of Iraq, and the Sharif, all these people that they bring him in, and they sell this idea to the Muslims in Palestine that look, our friends, the British, have promised us certain things and we believe in their promise. Our naivety as Muslims, brothers and sisters, we really need to get out of this. We really need to get out of the naivety that look, كل كفر ملة واحدة. You have to understand this. This is why I always tell the Muslims, study your aqidah. Understand what your aqidah is, because aqidah is a filter that will protect you. That will protect you from being played. That will protect you from being used. That will protect you from being, utilized. So, they are battling. And they do everything possible to end this resistance. The resistance does end. Some of the people are killed, some of the leadership people are killed. Resistance ends. It ends in a sense, these are the, you have Al-Saud, Amir Abdullah, one of Jordan, and King Ghazi of Iraq. As a resistance against the British drew in volunteer support from around the region. Britain needed to put extra troops. Britain called on its allies in the Arab world to exert pressure on the resistance, urged Palestinians to rely on the good intentions of our friends Great Britain. The resistance was halted and crushed. 1935, over 4,500 Palestinians are killed. The bloodshed begins. Right? But brothers and my sisters, I need you to understand something. This is the same time where you have other states are being created on the other side of the Muslim world. Remember, Pakistan is created when? 1947. Israel is created 1948. Then you have this whole Muslim region is being divided one after the other. The British are doing everything they can to use this nation-state theory, literally, to cut the Muslim lands in pieces and pieces and pieces and pieces, so there is no resistance against all of this, against what's happening. Right? Somebody's now called Pakistani, somebody's called Indian, somebody's called, Arabi, somebody's called this, somebody's called that. But the whole idea as a Muslim Ummah is fading. And that you have to understand. Till today it's happening. Right? This became, as I said in the beginning, it went from the Muslim Ummah problem, our problem, from the Arab problem, Palestinian problem, to Gaza problem, to West Bank problem, to Hamas problem. Now what happens? We're not killing, we just killed 40,000 people. But it's not the people that are our problem, it's Hamas. It's not, it's just as if October 7th, the whole mess started. The whole 75 years of history, don't talk about that. That's not history, I don't know what it is. It's not history. What is it? You tell me what it is.
It's a joke.
Right? So this, we have to, once you know the history, then you can put out exactly the nonsense that they have sold to us. Now, but I'm emphasizing this idea of nation state because brothers, till today it's killing us. Till today it's killing us. 1972, Bangladesh is created. Then comes Sudan. When did Sudan was created? Anyone know? South Sudan was when? 2011 or 8. Then you had North Sudan was cut off from Egypt. 1962 was cut off from Egypt. Egypt and Sudan was one. It was one area. There was no such thing as Sudan. Then they cut that out, and then they made this whole area of Egypt, and then they made it Sudan, and then Sudan cut off between North and South Sudan, and then Sudan now is going to be cut off from East and West. And then in the south of Sudan, there'll be something called Darfur. Cut them into pieces and pieces and pieces. The kuffar, always, their solution to anything is, another state. Now, when you think about the so-called Palestinian state that they're pushing so hard for, in reality, first of all, it's not acceptable to Muslims. Because we don't want to give an inch to the kuffar. It all belongs to Muslims. And we will take it back. Not today, tomorrow, but we will. We will not accept this nonsense. If not this generation, but following generation. But we will never surrender. So now, this back and forth is happening. 1948 happens, the state of Israel is created, and the first war, the first 1948 war happens. Can you imagine, brothers and sisters? Jordanian, the Transjordan, this Jordan, Abdullah, the first one. Anyone remember the first general of this Abdullah? What's his name?
British guy.
Huh? No. Bonus of Arabia, of course, he played a whole different ballgame. That's another thing that's already going on. He's the one who screwed up the whole. But what else? What's his name?
British guy.
Gog Pasha. Remember Gog Pasha? This guy was a British general who was leading the so-called Jordanian army into war against the Israelis. Can you imagine that? The British general is leading a war, leading the army, the Jordanian army, against this so-called Israeli state. And his job was, and literally this is what he did. He went into the area, and there was already a design for what, at that time, what Israel will be and what Palestinian state will be and all of this. So he literally, in this war, he literally carved out the areas and said, okay, now we stop here, because basically the game, the goal has been achieved in order to divide these areas the way we want it. Imagine the betrayal. So when you think about what's happening today, and when we're saying, how come these rulers are not moving, how come they keep watching the way they're watching, they are designed to do that. They were designed this way. You're just seeing it now. But they did it before. They're the ones that crushed the original resistance that took place against Palestinians, against the British rule. So now, this is some of the recent things here, right? The bloodshed begins. The same year Israel is founded, the Nakba occurs. Soldiers and settlers participate in the killing of Palestinians and seizure of their property. 400,000 Palestinians, the Muslims in this area, displaced, IDPs, internally displaced in their own lands. Massacres just in 1948 alone. Deir Yassin, Abu Shusha, Tantura, Lidda, Salina, all of these are happening. Majority of them are happening where? In the West Bank. Near Quds, near this area, near that area, right? The Quds, West Bank, East Jerusalem, these areas. And another joke, by the way, is this whole idea that this so-called Palestinian state that they want to put together. Do you know, brothers, in this area, there's over 780,000 settlers living there? The area that they're saying that this area will become the Palestinian state. 780,000 settlers live there. That means 1 million homes have been built in that area for the Jews. Do you actually think that they are going to remove 1 million homes for some Arabs? This is the thinking for them. Who are Arabs? Did you hear yesterday? He said we will not stop until 100,000 of them are killed. You heard that, yeah? Yesterday. He opened in the news. Man, we don't care. 50,000 already killed. Another 50,000 who's coming? Who's coming? Green light, diplomatic cover, political cover, everything is given. Who's giving them? The same ones that gave them when so-called Israel was created. Systematic massacres, Al-Aqsā massacre, 1994, Ibrahimi, have anyone here been to Ibrahimi Mosque? When you go there till today, I don't know, when I was there, you actually see the wall with the bullets. If you actually go touch the wall, many brothers, if you have good brothers with you, they'll show you. This is where that the New York doctor, Zionist, went in and shot 100 people almost, I think. 100 something people were killed. So many were injured. In Federal Prayer, he went and he shot people and he killed so many of them. And this was this guy from here, from New York. Then the Syrian refugee camp massacre. Now, what is it like today? All of this, 2008 to 2009, massacres, Gaza alone. Gaza alone. So I want you to understand this, because what you're thinking is happening in Gaza now is not what's happening now. You're looking at from 2008 to 2009, 2012, 2014, 2018, 2021, and now 2022. Life under occupation. 600,000 Jewish settlers living on occupied Palestinian land, 50,000 homes and structures demolished in occupied Palestine over 50 years. Restriction of movement, 4.9 million Palestinians face daily restrictions. Routine harassment, police brutality, IDF, which we should not call it IDF. Let's be very careful. There is no such thing as Israeli Defense Force. This should be IOF, Israeli Occupation Force. You have to say things the way they are. It's very important to understand there is no defense. This is an occupation. This is an apartheid state. This is an occupation which must be removed from the face of the earth. It is haram for the Muslims to have this state in the heart of the Muslim lands. Whether somebody likes it or they don't like it, doesn't matter. We have to say what Allah says. Right? It is not allowed. Occupation is not allowed. Now, routine harassments. Anyone has, you guys, some of you seem that you've been in the area. I spent a lot of time in Palestine, 3 months, going almost every place I saw it inside out. Brothers and sisters, as you know, some of the places you can't even walk on the street in front of your own house. You know that, because this is considered, this is only the settlers can walk. If you are living in this house, you have to actually go upstairs, use stairs in the back, and go use the alley to go where you're trying to go, because you're not allowed to use the actual street, because that's where the settlers are. You're not allowed to be there. In front of your own land, own. Not allowed. Now, here's the thing. Save the Children NGO, the main alleged crime for this detention is stone throwing, which can carry 20-year sentence in prison for Palestinian children. Just to throw a rock against the occupation, 20 years in prison. Some of the people that we're seeing today are very famous. Some of them were in jail for 5 years, 10 years, 12 years. Some of them went to jail when they were 11, 12, 13 years old, 14 years old. They're coming out now, they're 20, 25, 28. Imagine the oppression, imagine the level, what is actually taking place here. Throwing a stone, 20 years in jail. 86% of 228 former child detainees surveyed were beaten in detention, 42% were injured at point of arrest, including gunshot wounds and broken bones. Now, here's another thing that I want to say. There's also a lot of rape that actually happens of men in Israeli jails, boys, especially 14, 15-year-olds. And this has been something that was reported in the past by some of the NGOs to the State Department even, that those people, they called this, you know the guy, what's his name, Josh something, the guy who resigned. Josh Paul. He actually came out and he was saying clearly that, look, there has been situations where we have reported rape of children, boys in jails, and when we reported them, the NGO that reported that in Tel Aviv was put on a terrorism list.
What happened on October 7th was an absolute atrocity, was 1,000 atrocities. I think at the same time we condemn those atrocities, we have to condemn the atrocities that happen every day to Palestinians in the West Bank. You mentioned sexual violence. I was part of the human rights vetting process for arms going to Israel, and a charity called Defense of Children International Palestine drew our attention at the State Department to the sexual assault, actually the rape of a 13-year-old boy that occurred in an Israeli prison in the Mosque in Jerusalem. We examined these allegations. We believe they were credible. We put them to the government of Israel. And you know what happened the next day? The IDF went into the DCIP offices and removed all their computers and declared them a terrorist entity. I think it is vital that atrocities not happen to anyone, not sexual violations, not any kind of gross violation of human rights. We are looking at a situation where there is so much dehumanification, where people are not seen for the value that they have.
Can you imagine? So now here, the numbers, this is old, because I was giving this presentation to different universities also, and you're talking about 16,000 some people. Now, what's the number? At least, what's the number today, unfortunately? Huh? 27,000. And imagine, brothers and sisters, what the heck is going on here? We're sitting in the masjid. We as a Muslim Ummah are sitting and counting our dead. Our shuhada. How many dead today? Every morning you look up, oh, wow, increased to another 1,000, another 500, another 200. Now, who enables the occupation? Look, brothers and sisters, this is why I mentioned League of Nations, that made it possible to give the mandate to the British in order to partition Palestine. You know, it was funny. Yesterday, as you know, there's a lot of issues going on between the southern border of Lebanon and Palestine. There's whole back and forth going on between the and Hezbollah and all of this. You know what the funny thing is? Between Hezbollah and the IOF, you know who's guarding the blue line, the so-called blue line? Huh? Malaysian forces. Can you imagine? Muslim soldiers, Malaysian Muslim soldiers are the ones who are guarding and protecting Israel from being attacked. And it's the United Nations now. Remember, it was League of Nations, and now it's the United Nations that is using its so-called mandate, its so-called, as an institution of, of course, all of that, human rights and this and that. All of it died in Gaza, of course, we all know that. But using United Nations, so United Nations is using the Muslims like the way Britain used the Muslims to get what it got in Jerusalem, to get what it got in Al-Quds and these lands, using Muslim soldiers. You know, brothers and my sisters, when Gaza, the first time Gaza was attacked, Churchill was still around. The British were not allowed, they couldn't take it. Thousands of British soldiers were dead trying to take this area of Gaza, the first time when it was attacked. Because still at that time, the Muslims because Uthmani Khilafah was still there, and he was protecting this land. And when he was protecting this land, thousands, some numbers say almost 75,000 British soldiers died trying to take Gaza the first time. They still couldn't take it. But they took it the second time because because of the treachery, betrayal of the nations that they created, that came to help and aid the British against the Muslims. Imagine, their own people, their Muslim brothers, they came, part of the British army in order to attack Gaza, and they took Gaza the second time. So the point I'm trying to make, brothers and sisters, is that the reasons for weakness of this ummah has always been, number one, not only traitors. All of this is happening when the Muslims left the Sharia. The Muslims left Islamic thinking. The Muslims left the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As far as the ruling system is concerned, they left it somewhere else. They were Muslims. But again, as I said to you in the beginning, brothers and sisters, the Islamic ideology is based on Aqidah. Right? It's based on the Aqidah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists, Quran, Sunnah, right? Jannah, Nar, Qadar, Qadar, all of this is covered Aqidah, from which the Sharia emanates, the ideology emanates from. The moment you let go of that, then your dalil becomes your interest, maslaha, wisdom. You see today, right? All kinds of excuses given to do whatever you want. It's wisdom, brother. We have to use our wisdom. We have to use. Who said that? Is the dalil your wisdom? Why would we need Sharia if we need your wisdom, bro? Why did Allah reveal the whole guidance from the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Quran and Sunnah, if your wisdom was enough? I mean, what is the point of Quran and Sunnah? But when we left that, the filtration process that gave us and what protected us was lost. So now, when you don't have a proper way of thinking, you don't have principles upon which you make decisions, somebody else is making decisions for you. So now, the current wholesale slaughter of the Palestinian people, rooted in ethno-nationalistic colonial settler ideology, this is the next case of genocide, right? They're saying it is genocide. By the way, this is the same game they're playing with the Rohingya, right? Should we call it ethnic cleansing? Should we call it genocide? And the reason why is because if we say genocide, then there are certain responsibilities of the United Nations, but the United Nations doesn't want to do anything against China. Because if it's a genocide, let's say, if it's ethnic cleansing, then it's a responsibility of the United Nations to stop the genocide. Or if you're going to stop that ethnicity or genocide, then you're going to have to go against China. But that doesn't mean that can't happen because that's the United Nations Security Council. All of this is a game. And everybody's working with their own interest and with their own system, except the Muslims. Except the Muslims. You have become orphans. No mandate, no leadership. Nothing to come to support and take the Muslims. Look, occupation is justified. Now, there's a lot here. Hopefully, some of the questions that come up here. How much time do I have? You guys want me to end it for questions? There are a few things I want you guys to understand, but this is very important here. Media, mass media, right? Corporate control of media. You need to understand it. You need to understand how this works. Number one, right? You have billions of dollars spent on the media in order to control the mindsets of the people. Number two, use of experts, so-called experts. You see that on the shows. Oh, Middle East expert. I don't know when you became an expert. But he's an expert. Now, the moment he becomes, all you have to name is an expert. We can just have some Tom, Dick, and Harry becomes an expert all of a sudden, and now he can give you fatwa. Why two-state solution is necessary and the Muslims are sitting there. I don't understand. But this is our situation.
He's an expert too.
Yani, use of experts, suppose just give them names, he's an expert. Now he can tell you what's good, bad, and ugly. And you're supposed to sit there, he's an expert. Number 3, define the limits of discussion. Every time, think about it. Oh, October 7th, what do you think about what happened on October 7th? Who's limiting the discussion? But this is a strategy. The strategy is to start your discussion, ask you what happened since October 7th. That is to limit you and to say, oh, don't worry about anything else that happened in the past. But that's a strategy that we have to understand how it works. There's a setup, there's a narrative that is set up in order to start you from where they want. You have to be smart enough, and in order to do that, you have to know the history. You have to understand what happened in 1917, 1919, 1948, 1933 to 1939, what happened in 52, then it continues the 67 war and 73 war. All of this, you have to understand. If you don't understand, you're not going to be able to be in this game. But you have to understand from the perspective of the Sharia, brothers and sisters. Because people are very good at history. People are very good. There's a lot of good analysts out there. They can talk for. But we want to know what the Sharia has to say when we try to understand this. Because are you telling me that Allah Azza wa Jal, this world belongs to Allah? This dunya, Allah is the one in control, and He's not telling us how to look at this situation? So we need to make sure, last one, government legislation. Oh, no, you can't, that's illegal all of a sudden. Why? But that's what happened. Oh, you can't say that anymore. But this is what happened, I understand that. But now if you say that, you have to say it. What is coming next? Of course, this is the best thing, right? Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. This ummah has never been, we've been oppressed, we've been suppressed. There's a lot that has happened. But Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, this ummah has always returned. The crumbling of American world order. Believe me, brothers and sisters, what has happened in Gaza? One thing, be sure. Everything that the West has ever stood for, every idea, anything that they ever came and they said that, we're talking about human rights, or we're talking about, liberalism and thisism and thatism, whatever. All of those ideas that they thought that they can come and talk about and brag about, everything is gone in the garbage. Is buried in Gaza. No one now anymore has an ounce, they don't have an ounce of argument after what they have done and allowed to be done in Gaza. It's over. The Americans are losing grip in the Muslim lands. Everywhere you go, the Muslims are saying enough is enough. Now I told you, I was going to give you good news. Brothers, I have good people that I know in different parts of the Muslim world. One of the things I heard yesterday, and I want to say this because the Prophet ﷺ said, when you meet the Muslims, give them good news. And the good news is in many ways. Yesterday there were 2 generals in the Egyptian army that were released. Released meaning let go. Court martial. Many things are happening. This is not in the news. It's not in the news. And the reason for that is that Sisi is feeling threatened that his chair is in trouble. Because, brothers and my sisters, don't think that the armies belong to our brothers and our sisters. They belong to my cousin and your cousin, right? Your grandfather, my grandfather, your dad. These are the people who are the armies at the end of the day. Don't think they don't have hearts. Don't think they don't see what you're seeing. They may not be able to come and say the way I'm saying it now, but they are seeing. I'm sure you remember the third week when this whole thing was going on, the very young 20-year-old Egyptian soldier that came out and was saying, for God's sakes, you guys have trained us for years in Sahara, deserts, and we have some of the most amazing, this training. Why did you train us for? And he has a chance to use us. Why are you not using us? What's going on? So soldiers are questioning their leadership. And this is, especially when it starts happening in Egypt, place where 60, 70,000 political prisoners are sitting in jails in Egypt. 60,000. You're talking about 115 million people of Egypt total population. And if you're talking about 60 to 70,000 people in jail just for speaking the truth. Some of them killed, no one knows. When this Rabba al-Adawiyya happened, you remember? in Ramadan, a few Ramadans ago, when the Muslims in Egypt, they decided to rise up while they were crushed by tanks by the Egyptian army. Okay? Thousands were killed. But don't think that they were just sitting around and saying, it's okay, you did that to us, no problem. No. This is happening in Egypt. This is happening in Jordan. This is happening in Pakistan. Don't think when, this Asim Munir guy is running around everywhere, he went to he had 6 stops. He went to DOD, Defense of the Department of Defense, he went to Secretary of State, the Secretary of State, all of this. He went to 6 different places. He went to the head of the CIA, he went to Blinken, he went to What do you think is happening? The Muslim world is shaking. I heard even people saying that, look, this is the first time where there are some people who are saying to the army in Pakistan, we're not going to listen to you. This is rare. You never had this type of where there is a part within the army that is saying, no, we're not going to listen. This can happen. You're not going to accept this. Do you remember the first 4 days, when some of the Pakistani, some of the soldiers, low-level soldiers, were given 10 years in jail? You may not be hearing this because the whole thing was shut down. Literally, some of them came to the army in Pakistan and said, look, we're not asking you, Pakistani army, to move, don't move, just give us the ability to go and help our brothers in Gaza. The moment they said that, some of them were given 10, 15 years jail sentences. I'm talking about 8 to 9 weeks ago. This means the Ummah is thinking as an Ummah. Although the rulers are behind these so-called fake borders that have been created, and so they are shaking. But they know that their chairs, their thrones are being questioned and are being threatened. Israel is questioned. Israel as an imagine, brothers, 15,000 men are shaking the existence of Israel. Every single time Israel fights, it fights an existential war. Because for them, it's always like, we don't know, this might be our end, this might be our end, this might be our end. Because they're being hit by 4 different areas. Imagine you have 4 different fronts. Gaza is one. Then you have the so-called Israeli Arabs, the 1948 Arabs. Then you have the West Bank. Then you have the southern border. Imagine if these 4, and imagine betrayal again. This guy, his name is Mahmoud Abbas, of West Bank. Do you know, brothers and sisters, he has 70,000 men around him. On one of his orders, they can attack the occupation in West Bank. But you know he's doing nothing. Because he's been promised, he might be the guy who might run Gaza. Have you heard this one before? Oh, we promise you from Turkey to Yemen, we promise you Transjordan, we promise you Kada, we promise you Kaza. But then they hang left and right and center those people after they're done with them. So, the good news is that, look, we've been through this before. This Ummah has been through harsh, tough times. We have lost Masjid al-Aqsa before, but we have always gained it back. There are amazing, sincere Muslims, sons and daughters in this Ummah, who will not allow this oppression to continue on. They will take stance. And we have to ask our brothers and sisters in the armies to move. This is not a humanitarian matter, brothers and sisters. This is not a humanitarian matter. This is not just about calling so-and-so, calling so-and-so. This is about a systematic genocide, killing of massive amounts of people by an army. And an army must take a stand against them. You can't expect few people who are just trying to resist. This is a responsibility of the whole Muslim Ummah. Jazakumullahu khairan. I'm going to end it here, but I want, what questions do you have? Hopefully you have questions. Go ahead.